So, before my first question, just really quickly, I wanted to talk about something from your book. According to your book, it seems like your identity was repeatedly challenged throughout your life. As a child, you had to adjust from being the kid who was polite and got good grades at home to being the kid who had to show no fear on the streets of Detroit and wear an afro with an afro pick. Later on, your identity was challenged when you had to step outside your comfort zone and emerge as a leader of Islamic faith, as well as already being a secular leader. These are just two examples. So my question for you is, how else do you believe your identity has been challenged, and how has this contributed to who you are as a politician today?
Well, for sure, my identity has been challenged, but I think that everyone's identity is always challenged. In fact, I don't know how anyone grows as a person unless they have to confront what they assumed about the world with what they're learning about the world. I mean, take a college student, for example. In high school, you probably grew up with a lot of the kids in your class. You somehow you're an art kid, you're a sports kid, this kid, you kind of have an identity. And then you go to a college campus. Now all of a sudden, the things you were known for, you may not be known for. You may go to lectures that open your mind up about a whole set of ideas you hadn't even been exposed to before. You might find out things about yourself you didn't know or didn't really realize. And it's the first time you're really not under the umbrella of your parents. So, you may begin to form ideas different from what mom and dad believe the world to be. And so that's just the same and so I walk that path, just like anyone. But I tell you, I actually am constantly, what I've learned to do is to somehow lean into new realities, and challenge some of my basic assumptions about the world. I think that, I'm 55 years old now, and I have 4 kids. My youngest is 22. And what I've found is that if I'm not willing to put myself in an uncomfortable space of my core suppositions being challenged, I don't grow. In fact, one of the youth's complaints against older people is that they're stuck in a rut. And you think what you thought. And you think what you thought because you thought what you thought. And that's worked for you, and so that's your version of the world, but the world changes. In fact, the only thing that does not change is the process of change. Everything else changes. Everything else. In fact, you can define death by the absence of change, right? Abraham Lincoln's not changing anymore. He is who he is because he's lived his life. We can go back and examine his life, but even our perception of who he is has a life of its own. Some people say he's a liberator. Some people say he was a white supremacist. Some people say he's the murderer of Indian people because, he was the one who ordered the executions of the Dakota. So our view of who this historic person who's now dead has changed. So what's going on with me now? Look, right now, I have to get reacquainted with myself as an attorney because for the last 12 years, I was a legislator. Actually, for the last 16 years, I was a legislator. And because I was a state legislator 4 years before I was in Congress. And so now I'm back into my role as attorney. But even that's new because I used to be the kind of attorney who got the file and went to court and tried the case. Now I supervise people who do that, but my legal skills have got to be sharp because how can you supervise somebody and not if you don't know what they're doing? You can't teach somebody to play the flute unless you know how to play it, right? And even as a conductor of an orchestra, you may not know how to play every instrument, but you do understand what that instrument brings to the overall effect of the music. So you've got to have an appreciation for it. That's sort of a new role that I'm getting into now. My role is Attorney General, lead legal officer for the state of Minnesota. I'm breaking new ground. I'm in uncomfortable space, and I'm trying to, master a new set of skills. And I find it interesting and challenging and fun. And I have to admit that as I look back on my last few years in Congress, I didn't really look at it as particularly challenging. And therefore, I started looking for other things to do. I ran for chair of the Democratic National Committee because I thought this is a new challenge. And I ran for Attorney General at significantly lower pay because it's a new challenge and it's necessary work. Congress, you really can't fall into a rut there. And I needed to do something different. So I know a lot of people will avoid having their identity challenged, and I don't blame them because it's uncomfortable and can be a little scary. But after you do it and you get used to doing it, you may be looking for that new challenge. And I think I was doing that myself. But I love the job that I'm doing now, and it's all new to me, and I'm having a great time with it.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah, perfect. So, second, when you were elected into Congress for the first time, you faced some harsh criticism. Someone even, according to your book, compared your election to a Japanese American being elected into Congress during World War II. That was the one that really stuck with me the most when I was reading your book. So the next question I have for you is, how did controversy early on in your career help you cope with challenges that you faced in your most recent campaign for Attorney General?
Well, I don't think there's anything particularly natural about being the target of unwarranted hostility on a mass scale. Some people are born with really thick skin. I thought I was, but just opening up your Twitter feed, opening up your Facebook feed, looking on the television, opening up the paper, talking to a friend, and hearing all this horrible stuff about yourself that is not true is not an easy thing to do. But you do learn how to deal with it. Your skin does thicken. It stops keeping you up at night. You start to understand they can't be talking about you because they don't know you, right? This is all politically motivated. Within a competitive political environment, people one strategy of success is to demonize your opponent. And my opponents have tried to demonize me and scare people about who I am and what I could represent. And there's no doubt that occurred. In my most recent race, clearly, I had some challenges that I was facing. I'd never run statewide before. People told me I was crazy for doing this. But at the end of the day, look, I know that you cannot let fear of controversy stop you from pursuing goals that you think are just and good and right. Because if they can intimidate you from doing what you think is right, they can control you. And then what hope does the world have if people who want to do good won't do it because they fear what somebody else is going to say about them? And I've always believed in trying to live out what I say to other people. So, yeah, it taught me a lot. It taught me that don't take it personally because they don't know you, so it couldn't possibly be personal. Understand that people's political motivations drive them to do desperate, sometimes horrible things that for some people, lying and truth-telling is on a moral plane, But for other people, it's on a strategic plane. Two very different things. So a lot of people will like, oh my God, that person's lying. And they'll be outraged that this person is lying. But when you understand, some people do not consider lying a moral failure. They consider it a strategic deception designed to achieve a political outcome. So they don't feel bad for lying. In fact, they feel that they're smart and clever for lying because, they don't really call it lying. They call it being smart. They call it being clever and deceptive and tricky and cagey and, and they just don't see it. And so for them, they don't feel guilt about it. In fact, they think you're stupid because you didn't figure out a clever lie to hurt them. But you can't live your life on other people's standards. So I still think lying's wrong. And I'm going to die that way, because, the world needs more truth, not more falsehood.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. To say you overcame some challenges along the way is definitely an understatement, if anything.
Oh yeah. Well, look, I'm a religious person, so what I believe is by God's grace, right? So, bam.
Right, for sure. This is, and you kind of did touch on this, but I am going to ask it. So when someone makes a personal attack on you publicly, what goes into your thought process when you cope with the negativity, and how has your faith contributed to how you deal with your critics along the way?
Well, let's just say when you are the target of a personal attack, the natural thing for me to do is to sort of swing back, to call them a liar, to maybe, to demonstrate disgust for what they just said. But what I've learned is to hold still for a minute. Not to do nothing, but to hold still for a minute, slow down, breathe, and assess what's being said, and somehow try to respond in a way that elevates the conversation, doesn't just drag it all back into the mud. Because as a matter of strategy, I've learned that some people will say awful things not because they want people to believe them, but because they want to just cast doubt and confusion into the conversation. So, for example, you take it off me personally and put it on something else. Every reputable climate scientist will tell you that the human behavior is changing the climate to the detriment of humanity's ability to live on the planet and much of the flora and fauna of the planet as well. The people who deny human contributions to climate change, they don't really want people to believe them. They just want to inject enough doubt so that people don't know what to do. Same strategy when it was like cigarette smoking. Does cigarette smoking cause cancer? Well, everybody knows it does, but the people who were hired by the industry just said, well, we don't know, could be something else. So they just try to change that. And so this is a tactic. You've got to understand when you are the target of a tactic. I think it's important, after you're the target of an attack of some kind, to be still, to calm down, to listen, and to plan your response in a way that elevates the conversation. And again, to try not to take it personally, because if you take it personally, you'll respond personally. And when people see you just sort of defending your own honor, they see that as human and understandable, but they also see it as not what they expect out of their leadership. People have leadership, they have greater expectations. They expect you to rise above the pettiness and the mudslinging, and you should expect that of yourself. So Prayer is. I believe in prayer. I believe in meditation. I believe in gratitude. And in some of the toughest moments of my life, these are the things that helped me get through what I was going through.
Excellent. Just kind of just because you brought up climate change, not to get too political or anything by any means, but I just what you said about how people who deny climate change, it's a tactic, it's strategic, and it might fulfill a personal agenda. Maybe sometimes the oil industry will help a man feed his family. But so I kind of want to just, and this is totally off script, but
no, let's go off script.
I kind of just want to ask, when do you think we will get to the point where people and politicians and industries will start to realize that denying climate change to fulfill their maybe financial agenda? When do you think we will get to the point where everyone will just realize that we can't do that any longer, that it's too urgent to prioritize financial success for corporations? Do you think, how close are we?
We are right in the middle of it. It's already begun. There are more people employed in solar and wind industry than in the coal industry. Companies are making the conversion. The state, our governor just announced carbon free by 2050. Yep. And we are full off in the moment. Most people agree with the Green New Deal, a concept to convert our buildings to be more energy efficient, to convert our transportation to be more multimodal, our cars to be more fuel efficient, even switching them to electric, to generate that electricity through solar and wind and wave sources. We are in the middle of it. It is happening now. And it's happening at multiple levels too, by the way. We're even exploring new areas where people have asked themselves, how does the way that we feed ourselves contribute to climate change? Because meat production has a very big contribution to that problem. So more people are going to non-meat sources of nutrition and food. And so, this is the direction we're heading in. It's easy to find organic products, nowadays, whereas before it was looked upon as sort of a hippy-dippy thing. Now it's a mainstream thing. So now, of course, we got a long way to go. The president is a climate denier, and so are many people who lead his cabinet. He pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accords, which obviously was extremely dangerous and bad. But I'm telling you, governors and mayors all over the country are like, well, you might pull out, but we're not. Colleges, schools, look at all the high schools that have like a green club, right? And so I feel that we have a shot at meeting the demands of the moment to address climate. I feel that we do, but we've also got to keep in mind that there's a lot of people who are locked into the fossil fuel industry and meat production industry, and they don't necessarily need to do that work, but they do need good work. So we've got to be very mindful about conversion and how when you switch from one industry to another, there are human casualties, right? There are people who, but the truth is we went from a horse-based society to an auto-based society, and the people who used to shoe horses, they couldn't do that anymore. We've had shifts and contributions in our economy, and we will continue to have them. But I think that if we know that the disruption's happening, we've got to be mindful and keep a eye on how this disruption impacts local communities.
Absolutely. Definitely something that my generation especially has to be very mindful of. I personally actually am vegan, so it's funny you brought up the meat industry, but so yeah, that's always good to have an optimistic conversation about that.
But vegan used to be like Like, people used to be like, well, who's a vegan? I mean, why would anybody want to be a vegan? But now it's like,
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming, yeah.
It's and so there you go.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know we only have a few minutes left here, but I would like to just ask one more question, kind of bringing us back to
Whatever you like.
the subject earlier. So in your book, you also talk about how kind of your faith and coming into Congress was controversial in a post 9/11 society. You talk for a few chapters about just kind of the inequality that Muslims faced in a post 9/11 world, how it was how it starts to become racialized rather than seen as a religious aspect of a human being and an American citizen. And so I just want to ask you to end here, do you believe being a Muslim politician in an Islamophobic post 9/11 society made you emotionally stronger and maybe intellectually stronger as well as a politician?
I do believe it's made me stronger. Again, how do you get physically stronger? Well, you encounter resistance. You go jogging, which is, you overtax your lungs. And then next time you run, your body will adjust, right? That's how you get in shape. You overtax that muscle, and then the muscle responds, and then you're stronger, and that's how you end up getting built. And it's the same way when it comes to, spiritual, emotional circumstances of a person. You go through tough times, it can make you tougher. But I will say that it can make you better, or it can make you bitter. It's important to keep that in mind, that tough times sometimes make us bitter, angry, and cynical. And that's where faith can help you get back on the better path, right? That's where faith can help you remember that trouble does not last always. Things are going to get better. After the hardship comes the ease. And then it'll help you remember that this is really not about you, that this is things, don't personalize it so much. And so that's my thought about that. But I will say this, being a Muslim politician post 9/11, yeah, it brought out some people's meanness, but it also brought out some people's real true decency too. I will say that I have been the beneficiary of a lot of very charitable, friendly, heartfelt support. It has not been a constant story of hardship and difficulty. It's been some of that, but it's also been some awesome moments. And watching, I remember there's a friend of mine named Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and she's Jewish. And I remember when I swore in on the Quran, she said, "Hey man, don't worry about it. When I swore in on the Tanakh, which is a holy scripture of Jewish people." So, I mean, there's solidarity there, right? And she and I went on to work on a whole bunch of other things. Long story short, when we go through tough times, yes, it stings, but one of the benefits of it is you see the people who are really sincere and dedicated and are willing to stand up for what they believe in as they stand by you in your time of trouble. So it's important to keep that lesson in mind too. When you go through anything of struggle, some people who you thought were with you are against you or just abandon you, and some people you thought were never for you, they stand up and they walk you. They help. They're there. So it really there's a spiritual lesson to be learned from that. So hey, thanks a lot for stopping in.
No, thank you. I really appreciate this.